I'm back again for another quick video lecture regarding American politics, Chapter 9 on the political parties. And again, I'm just running through these chapters quickly. And this is one of our meatier chapters. There's a lot of ins and outs here. So I highly recommend that you guys keep up reading, and hopefully these are posted, and I'm making my corrections to the notes. But here we go. So we're on the political parties, and as many of you probably already know, there are two primary political parties in the United States, and there are going to be reasons for that. So why there are two, meaning not necessarily the two that we have. So you're going to want to make sure you know the reasons behind why there are primarily two parties in the United States. But hopefully all my notes are accessible. So you see here, this is the current chairperson for the Democratic National Committee, Tom Perez, and Ronna McDaniel in the same position for the Republicans. Right? So it's just a way of me spiffing up the notes, making them look a little more interesting. So I just have PP, if you forgive the letters, to be a abbreviation for political party. So we can think of political parties as a mechanism for solving collective action problems, and then the book tells us collective action problems are problems that impact or affect many and require many people working together collectively, obviously, to solve. So if that makes sense. So global warming is a collective action problem. It affects a lot of people, and it's going to take a lot of people to solve that problem. Right? The catch is that individual payoff or benefit is low. Right? So if we get collective, global warming might not be the best one, but I'm not going to really get anything directly other than a better environment if we solve that problem. But getting people to vote is a good collective action problem, right? So I go vote. I don't actually get a lot of benefit from it. Maybe I get my civic duty, especially if the candidate I vote for loses, right? I might not get any benefit if I go and vote. An example is voting or jury duty. Many of these activities see these activities as burdensome, right? So you have to go out and you have to go vote, stand in line with people with COVID, and then your candidate loses. It's like, what the hell did I waste my time for? And not much individual reward comes from them. But we all have to pitch in for these institutions to work, meaning political institutions. So again, I have my thing here. From page 238, political parties are groups of people with similar interests who work together to create and implement policies, meaning public policies. They do this by gaining control over the government by winning elections. Party platforms, which is a key term, guide members of Congress in drafting legislation. So that's part of this homework that you have in association with this reading. So make sure you have read the party platforms and have the basics with what they're about. I'm just going to have a mouse. See what else we have here. Parties guide proposed laws through Congress and inform party members how they should vote on important issues, right? So different states, different people, they don't contact people. It's a big party organization. So the party platform is information for people to know, like, what am I supposed to do if I'm a Democrat? How am I supposed to do policy if I'm a Republican? Finally, they coordinate political campaigns and mobilize voters, right? So they're a collective way of getting money, getting a message out. Similar to interest groups, but political parties obtain formal institutional power. They wield coercive power. So again, another key term, coercive power, the capacity to get someone to do something that they otherwise would not do, right? I don't want to pay my taxes. How does the government get me to do that? Because there'll be penalties. The police will come knocking on my door if I don't pay my taxes, right? And again, we're going to do a chapter on interest groups. But one of the things to note, the difference between the two is that political parties will wield institutional power. Interest groups do not. They influence politicians who are part of political parties to wield power in a particular way. Sorry for all the P's there. Political parties are not addressed in the Constitution. Critical aspect of this class, things that are and are not addressed in the Constitution, you should know and be able to address, right? George Washington famously did not want the United States to have political parties. They just kind of naturally arose because people have competing interests. They have to solve this collective action problem, and the easiest way for people to win most of their victories or successes most of the time is to organize to a political party when we're dealing with these kind of social issues. And so political parties, for instance, help nominate people to political office. There is no mechanism. Anyone can run, any person can run in the United States for a political office. Political parties make that process easier, and they help keep other people out of politics, and we'll talk about that. The lack of instruction has been filled by the history of political parties in the United States. So there are currently more than two political parties. There's two dominant ones, but we generally have always had two dominant political parties, although they always have not been the Democrats or Republicans. You're not going to have to know that history, but it's interesting history if you can do the work or are already very well versed in American history. So this key term we've come to learn is this idea of a platform. So it's essentially all the beliefs that a party stands on. So it's a metaphor for an actual wooden platform on which you would stand. And then there's these particular planks, which are like individual beliefs. We talked about attitudes and beliefs with regards to public opinion. They're the individual beliefs that people have. So again, like Republicans, very pro-gun, Democrats, very anti-gun. They both have distinct party planks that make up their platform with regards to firearms in the United States. And then every 4 years at the party convention, party officials come together to update their platform. So they're usually very similar, but obviously if you were to measure them from 2016, we talked about how the Republicans are basically running on the same platform this year. They're not going to change very much, right? But if we were going to go 20 years in the past, 40 years in the past, they are going to become monumental differences. And they all basically revolve around the issues of the day. What are things talking about? So you can guarantee, even though as of this recording I haven't read through the party platforms, they're both going to address COVID. They're both going to address quarantine issues. And so why? Because that's something that's going on now. So we have this kind of book talks quite a bit about Andrew Jackson. So he's essentially the founder of the modern Democratic Party. He's the 7th president of the United States. And so why was Andrew Jackson a big deal with regards to the party? Because, and again, if you know the history, he wasn't exactly the best person in the world, but he kind of changed the American political culture's attitude to care about what regular people care about. So it wasn't elites. It wasn't landed property individuals. It was just regular folks. And so that's kind of the legacy of the Democratic Party and slavery. But if you're politically active, that may upset you, but it's true. But again, so Andrew Jackson does have, I think, this kind of important legacy. And there's a clip to the West Wing here about Andrew Jackson's approach to hearing the voice of the people, right? So hence the name, the Democratic Party, even though we are a liberal democratic republic in the United States. You might say the Democrats wanted to make the country more democratic, but they were still in that liberal democratic republic framework. The U.S. political parties began to work to organize and mobilize voters for elections at all levels of government. So again, parties work at the federal, state, and local level. So usually anyone who's a politician, even a mayor of a city, is going to have a major political party affiliation. But there are going to be instances of, say, independents, libertarians, other kind of parties, even communists. There was a few communists in, I think, Seattle's city council with all this stuff going on. Loyalty to the party was rewarded with jobs in the past, right? So again, it wasn't just like, oh, I want my candidate to win. You could get benefit from it. And this led to the development historically to political machines, which emphasized personal politics and many times blatant corruption. So here's a scene from a movie. There are racial slurs, so I'll warn you. Again, I have it here. But I think this is from the movie Gangs of New York, and I think it's a fair characterization historically, even though it's a dramatization of how political parties operated and worked. So that's why if someone were to complain, I'm comfortable defending myself and showing you that clip. Again, if you feel like you have to complain, go for it. But you're not going to change the fact that's how people behaved and spoke and stuff like that. So then why do we have a two-party system? I can't really emphasize this enough. This is the heart of this chapter. You really, really want to know why in the United States we have two parties. I will have a clip from 2016's election to show libertarians. That one might be kind of funny or possibly even graphic at the end. But to kind of show maybe this is why we as Americans as a whole, even if you happen to be a libertarian, why we don't necessarily take the Libertarian Party as seriously as perhaps we should or other people want them to be. So there are third-party organizations. So right now the two big ones are probably the Libertarians and the Green Party. But none of them has been able to take a position of national prominence. Although a few third-party political candidates for president have had significant impacts on the results of a few presidential elections. That could be the case in 2016, but it was most definitely the case in 1992, where Ross Perot ran as a third-party candidate. Because his platform was similar to the Republican Party's, many people who would have otherwise voted for a Republican voted for Ross Perot, a significant amount of people, and that was enabled essentially Bill Clinton to win the 92 election, right? So if you don't understand how a third party can take votes away from a major party, ask me that question. Hopefully it makes sense. But it's like, people are on a scale, and say you're more conservative, you might vote for a more conservative third party candidate instead of the Democratic candidate. So oftentimes people who often do campaigns for Democrats and Republicans. They don't like third parties because parties that are similar to their party tend to take votes away and will cost their candidate an election. Another famous third party was here. This picture is of Teddy Roosevelt, and he formed the Bull Moose Party, right? Because he was able to run for another presidential term. He didn't end up winning, but he didn't want to be associated with the Republicans or the Democrats. He was a Republican, and so he started his own political party. Two parties have predominated in the United States because it's part of our structure of our elections, with one seat tied to a geographic area tends to lead to the dominance of the two-party system. Why? So this is where we get to the meat and potatoes. It's part of the history of the United States. One, people are just used to two parties. Your grandparents had two parties, your grandkids will have two parties, so it's just kind of like this history. Super, super important key term for the, I don't know when this video comes up, but when the election that came or happened or is happening, America has a winner-take-all system. It means we don't share, we don't do proportional representation. A person who gets the majority of votes in a particular area, the geographical location, gets all of that seat. Right? Other countries do it differently with parliaments, where the proportion of the vote, then a representative body gets that proportion in the assembly, whatever they may have. So even if a political party gets 10% of the vote, which will get you nothing in the United States, because you can't win 10% of the seat, you might get 10% of the total legislative seats. So that's why in parliaments there are multiple parties in Canada and England and countries like that. Let's see. Because in this winner-take-all system, a candidate who becomes a representative represents a particular area. You get to know that person. You get to know their record. And so by having this kind of incumbency effect from our previous discussion, you have an advantage over other people or third parties. The United States relies on first past the post, also known as a plurality of voting, which basically means that a candidate with the most votes wins, whether or not they have a majority of the votes. Right? Because not all the time it's not two people running. It could be several people running, but whoever gets the most votes gets the position. Right? That's first past the post. The failure of the third parties to win and the possibility that they will draw votes away from the party of the favored, someone favored before, results in the win for the party the voter least liked. Right. So again, if you were a Republican or a Ross Perot conservative in 1992, then by you actually voting for Ross Perot, it allowed the person who you liked least further away from your values, Bill Clinton, to become president. Right. So that's kind of what I was speaking about earlier. That's from page 336. Are some of my page numbers right or wrong? I don't know. Let's see. I think so. It's got to be 238. Yeah, those numbers have to be wrong. I'll have to go back and fix those. 340, 336. Yeah, I don't know. I'll go back and fix it. Let's see here. Believe it or not, the United States is very similar, right? So we have two parties, and the two parties are actually very moderate, especially compared to parties in the international world. And Americans, yeah, we do kind of have this shared kind of culture. And so actually, as much as it's not something you all believe or buy because of the way our media works, yeah, we have very similar values. There are burdens some states create to candidates who are running as independents, like obtaining a number of signatures, right? So both parties can agree that they don't want third parties, right? So they're going to make it harder for third parties to get onto ballots, right? So the two parties go, we're the two dominant parties, we're just going to be on the ballot. Oh, third party in California, you're going to have to get, I don't know, whatever amount of signatures to get on. Political parties exist for the purpose of winning elections in order to influence public policy. This requires them to build coalitions across a wide range of voters, which is what I was talking about, the moderate kind of way our parties work, who share similar preferences. Since most of the United States voters identify as moderates, the historical tendency has been for two parties to compete for the middle while also trying to mobilize their more loyal base, right? Yeah, it's just kind of interesting things the way this works. Again, I think this is a statement. Again, the book has lots of these. I think I tend to agree with this statement, but you're more than welcome to agree. Just because we're going through this doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. It's just kind of a base, a jumping off place. Party realignments are when parties kind of shift their values. That might be happening now. I won't get into that. And critical elections is where we see this big shift kind of happen. A famous one where you guys can look up historically is the election of 1968, the presidential election. It seemed like the people who voted Democrat and Republican kind of switched for a variety of reasons. A lot of those dealt with, again, civil rights issues and segregation issues. But this is not a history class. And then we get to kind of the modern kind of politics here. Parties consist of three things: the electorates, the people who vote; the party organization; and office holders, or the people in actual political office, political power. Party organization then is the formal structure of a political party, and its active members are responsible for coordinating party behavior and supporting party candidates. It is a vital component of any successful party because it bears most of the responsibility for building and maintaining the party brand. It also plays a key role in helping select and elect candidates for public office from 345. And then I should have a Canvas slide there. You guys can see an example of party branding over the years, if you don't know what that means. So these are kind of working exactly like, marketing firms. Nike has the swoosh, that's their marketing brand, right? The Republicans, Democrats, which I don't have it on this one, but on our YouTube slide, you'll see it. And on the homework, the Democrats are donkeys, that's their symbol. It's a tool of the working man, so it's not because they're jackasses, right? It's because people would use it at the farm, especially back in the older time of America. And so any working average person would be familiar with an animal like a donkey and how it works. And obviously the stubbornness and getting your way kind of aspect, the metaphor. And then I'm actually not sure why Republicans have their symbol be the elephant. Maybe someone can enlighten me in their research for the homework. The structure of the United States government causes challenges for party coordination and in achieving policy goals, specifically federalism. So the fact that parties have to kind of coordinate at a state level and a national level, craft different messages, that's going to be a challenge because it's more work. It's more money you have to spend on getting the message out, so somewhat different messages. And so this creates essentially different constituencies for office holders that they must satisfy. Right? And then key terms that I'm really not going to go through that you should go through on your own: divided government, bipartisanship, political polarization, and gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is really, really important. It has to do with how we structure voting districts. And the people will complain about one or the other, but both parties do it. That's why this really does exist, because they're trying to craft by essentially through agreement and law the voting districts, because people move around, and you're trying to just carve out where your voters are so that you're more likely to win. So if you ever look at one of these things, you'll see they look like salamanders, weird shapes, hence the gerrymandering term from whatever, the 1800s. So yeah, I moved very, very quickly through chapter 9, faster than I anticipated actually. This is a very, very important chapter. It's one of our student learning outcomes. The school expects us to kind of learn the difference between the Democrat Party values and the Republican Party values, or Democratic Party values, excuse me. I never know. I hear people, I think Republicans call it Democrat as a slight. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you can inform me about that. But the Democratic Party values, and again, you have this homework where you have to actually go through, read the party platform, skim them, talk about one positive aspect and one negative aspect. I don't want to know if you're a Democrat or Republican or don't like it either. You should be able to identify positive and negatives, and I'm not going to assume necessarily that you agree with it, right? So I might agree with lower taxation. I might think it's a positive, but it doesn't mean that's my preferred policy outcome. I go, well, I wish we could pay lower taxes, but I think personally, not that I do, speaking hypothetically, that it's a bad idea. But I could see why my Republican friends would like to have lower taxes on the X, Y, or Z issue, right? So when you write these homeworks, they're not expressions of your personal belief sets. They're just like, I can see why someone can see that as a good thing. I can see why this is problematic, and you're going to give reasons. So hopefully that was helpful and useful for understanding the political parties in the United States. And I will see you guys in another video.